My husband's ex-wife weaponized my 15-year-old stepson to poison my unborn baby simply because my son's birth would reduce their multi-million-dollar inheritance by 33%. I am currently trembling in a safe house, clutching the toxicology report that proves they spiked my drink with veterinary drugs intended to force a miscarriage. I thought I was living a fairy tale in Connecticut, but I was actually sleeping under the same roof as my executioners. The woman I tried to befriend was orchestrating my demise. The boy I tried to mother was the delivery system, and the man I married was too weak to see that his family was trying to kill his new heir. When does greed stop being a sin and start being a death sentence? I had to choose between being a polite victim or a ruthless survivor. So I used every legal weapon I had to burn their entire world to the ground. Now, the mother is in jail, the son is in detention, and I am alone with a guilt that feels heavier than the child I am carrying. I took everything from them to ensure they could never hurt us again. But looking at the wreckage, I have to ask you all, Xiao Jing Hao Ling 2 hash is greater than did I turn into a monster to defeat one. My name is Rachel Sterling. I am 32 years old, currently serving as the creative director for a boutique branding agency in Manhattan. Though I have been on maternity leave for exactly 2 weeks, I live in Greenwich, Connecticut, in a colonial-style estate that costs more to heat in the winter than most people earn in a year. To the outside world, I am the woman who has it all. I have the career, the looks that require 2 hours of maintenance every morning, and Mark, a husband who looks at me as if I hung the moon. But if you look closer, past the freshly painted shutters and the impeccable landscaping that I supervise like a hawk, you will see the cracks. I am the second wife, the younger wife, and in this town, that title comes with a target on your back. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror in our master bedroom, smoothing the fabric of my cream-colored maternity dress. It was silk, expensive, and draped perfectly over the 7-month bump that carried my son. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of fresh hydrangeas and expensive cleaning products. This was supposed to be my day. Downstairs, 50 guests were mingling in our backyard for the gender reveal party. It was a production I had curated with the precision of a military operation. I needed the Homeowners Association board members to see that the Sterling family was stable, happy, and decidedly not the chaotic mess that Mark's previous marriage had been. I walked down the grand staircase, my hand trailing lightly on the mahogany banister. Through the French doors, I could see the party in full swing. The catering staff moved like silent ghosts, offering trays of lobster rolls and champagne. It looked perfect. It looked peaceful. It was a lie. Mark was standing near the patio heater, laughing at a joke made by our neighbor, Bob. Mark is 45, with a kind of soft, non-threatening handsomeness that makes people trust him instantly. He is a good man, perhaps too good. He hates conflict the way a cat hates water. He saw me approaching, and his face lit up. He reached out, pulling me into his side, his hand resting protectively on my stomach. "You look breathtaking," he whispered, kissing my temple. "Thank you, darling," I replied, my voice pitched perfectly for the guests nearby to hear. Inside my head, however, I was calculating. I was scanning the perimeter like a Secret Service agent. I was looking for Leo and Mia, my stepchildren. I found them near the dessert table. Leo, 15, was slouching in a way that threatened to ruin his spine, wearing a hoodie despite my explicit request for a collared shirt. Mia, 13, was tapping furiously on her phone, her face illuminated by the blue light, looking bored out of her mind. They were the visible remnants of Mark's past, the living, breathing receipts of a transaction that had ended years ago but was still costing us a fortune. I walked over to them, forcing a smile that made my cheeks ache. "Hey guys," I said, keeping my tone light. "Could you maybe put the phones away just for an hour? The cake cutting is coming up." Mia looked up. Her eyes were dark, intelligent, and devoid of any warmth. She looked at me, then her gaze dropped to my stomach. It was a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. "We are just telling Mom how boring this is," Mia said, her voice dripping with teenage malaise. "She says hi. By the way, I felt a muscle twitch in my jaw. Vanessa." The name alone was enough to spike my blood pressure. Mark's ex-wife, the woman who refused to work because she claimed her full-time job was raising the children, despite the fact that they were in school 7 hours a day and she had a housekeeper. "That is nice of her," I said, my voice tight. I walked away before I said something that would ruin my reputation as the patient stepmother. I circulated the room, accepting compliments, playing the part. I was good at this. I had worked hard to scrub the grit of my middle-class upbringing off my skin. I belonged here. I had earned this house. I had earned this life. Then, the atmosphere shifted. It was not a noise. It was a silence. The hum of conversation in the garden dropped, rippling from the driveway toward the patio. I turned toward the side gate. A car had pulled up right onto the crushed gravel of the driveway, ignoring the valet parking signs. It was a battered SUV that looked like an eyesore against the backdrop of Porsches and Teslas. The door opened, and Vanessa stepped out. She was wearing a dress that was too tight and a shade of red that was too aggressive for a garden party. She looked like a desperate plea for attention. She was not invited. We had explicitly agreed, through lawyers, that she was not to set foot on the property unless it was for a scheduled pickup or drop-off. Mark went pale. He looked at me, panic flaring in his eyes. He started to move toward her, his posture apologetic before he even opened his mouth. That was Mark's problem. He was always apologizing for things he did not do. Vanessa walked past him as if he were a piece of furniture. She headed straight for me. The guests parted like the Red Sea, their eyes wide, hungry for drama. This was the entertainment they had secretly hoped for. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I did not flinch. I stood my ground, placing one hand on my belly, a subconscious shield. Vanessa stopped inches from me. She smelled of cheap vanilla perfume and stale cigarettes. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Her eyes were flat, dead things. "Congratulations, Rachel," she said loudly, performing for the audience. "Thank you, Vanessa," I replied, my voice ice cold. "This is a private event." She leaned in then, invading my personal space. She brought her lips close to my ear, intimate, like an old friend sharing a secret. "You think this baby is going to secure your spot?" she whispered. Her voice was a hiss, low and venomous. "You think this little bastard is going to get a share of the trust? Do not dream. I will burn this house to the ground before I let you take a dime from my children." She pulled back, winking at me. Then she turned to the crowd, waved cheerfully, and walked over to Leo and Mia. I watched her. I expected her to drag them away, to make a scene, but she did not. She just touched Leo's shoulder and smoothed Mia's hair. They leaned into her touch. They looked at her with adoration, and then all three of them turned to look at me. It was not just dislike anymore. It was a united front. a phalanx of hatred. Vanessa marched back to her car and drove off, leaving a cloud of exhaust fumes hanging over my expensive cheese platters. Mark rushed over to me, grabbing my arms. Rachel, honey, are you okay? I am so sorry. I do not know why she came. She is just... 萧玉静后, Ling. 2# is greater than she is having a hard time with the alimony adjustment. Ignore her. She is just crazy. I looked at my husband. He wanted to believe this was just a bitter ex-wife acting out because of money. He wanted to smooth it over, eat some cake, and pretend everything was fine. But I looked back at Leo and Mia. They were smiling. It was faint, barely there, but it was a smile of satisfaction. They were not embarrassed by their mother's behavior. They were emboldened by it. I realized then that the oil spill I had found on the kitchen floor last week was not an accident. The way Leo had left his skateboard at the top of the basement stairs 2 days ago was not just teenage negligence. Mark squeezed my hand, trying to ground me. Let us cut the cake. Rachel, come on, do not let her ruin this. I smiled at him. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Of course. Darling, I said, but as I took the knife to cut into the blue-colored cake that announced I was having a son, my hand was trembling, not from fear, but from a sudden, chilling clarity. Vanessa was not just a bitter ex. She was a general marshalling her troops, and I was sleeping under the same roof as the enemy soldiers. This was not about jealousy. This was about survival. And as the guests cheered and clapped for the blue confetti, I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. The war had officially begun, and I was the only one who knew we were under attack. 3 weeks had passed since the gender reveal party, and the house had settled into a rhythm that felt less like a family routine and more like a hostage situation. The silence in the hallways was heavy, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on my arms stand up whenever I walked past Leo or Mia. We were living in a beautiful 4,000 square foot Cold War. I woke up on a Tuesday morning with the sun streaming through the silk curtains, casting long, deceivingly warm shadows across the room. Mark had already left for the office. He was a partner at a law firm in downtown Stamford, which meant he was gone before 7 and back after 7, leaving me as the sole custodian of his previous mistakes. I sat up, groaning slightly as the weight of my pregnancy shifted. My back ached constantly now, a dull throb that served as a reminder of my vulnerability. I went downstairs to make tea. The house was quiet, too quiet. Leo and Mia were on spring break, which meant they were here, lurking in their rooms or, as I was about to discover, setting traps. I walked into the kitchen. It is a chef's kitchen, pristine and white, with an island large enough to land a small plane on. I was looking at the coffee maker, thinking about decaf, when my right foot hit something slick. It happened in slow motion. My heel slid forward with terrifying speed. My center of gravity, already compromised by the baby, pitched violently backward. My hands flailed, grasping at empty air. A scream tore from my throat, but it was strangled by sheer panic. I twisted my body instinctively, trying to land on my side rather than my back, trying to protect the life growing inside me. My hip collided hard with the edge of the island cabinetry. The pain was sharp and immediate, shooting down my leg. I crumbled to the floor, gasping for breath, my hands immediately flying to my stomach. I lay there for a moment, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I waited for the cramping. I waited for the blood. When neither came, I slowly pushed myself up to a sitting position. That was when I saw it. A puddle of liquid gold spread across the polished marble floor. Olive oil, not just a few drops, but a significant spill, positioned exactly where one would step when entering the room from the hallway. I looked up. The bottle of expensive imported olive oil was sitting on the counter, uncapped. Saouding too. Oops. I turned my head. Mia was sitting at the breakfast nook, eating a bowl of cereal. She had not made a sound when I fell. She was watching me, her spoon hovering halfway to her mouth. Her expression was perfectly blank, a mask of innocent indifference. "Did you fall?" she asked. Her voice lacked any inflection of concern. I pulled myself up, gripping the counter, my hip throbbing. I looked at the oil, then at her. "You spilled this," I said. My voice was trembling, not from fear, but from a rage so hot it felt like it could melt the appliances. "You spilled this, and you left it there." "I did not see it," Mia said, shrugging. She put a spoonful of Cheerios into her mouth and crunched loudly. "I was making toast. It must have tipped over. You should be more careful." "Rachel, pregnant women are clumsy." Mom said, "Your center of balance is off." Mom said, the phrase that haunted this house. "This was not an accident." "Mia," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "You could have killed the baby." Mia rolled her eyes. "God, you are so dramatic. It is just oil. Do not be such a Karen." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her, but I knew that was exactly what she wanted. If I lost control, I became the villain. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the spilled oil and the expensive lilies on the counter. "Clean it up," I said. "Now." She stared at me, challenging me. Then, slowly, she slid off the stool and grabbed a single paper towel. She threw it over the puddle, where it soaked up almost nothing. "There," she said. I realized then that this was not just teenage rebellion. This was calculated. She was testing the perimeter of my authority. That afternoon, the assault continued. I was carrying a basket of laundry down to the basement. As I approached the top of the stairs, I paused. Something felt wrong. The lighting was dim, but I saw a shadow across the top step. I reached out and flicked the switch. There, perfectly balanced on the edge of the first step, was Leo's skateboard. If I had not stopped, if I had taken that step with the laundry basket blocking my view, I would have stepped right onto the wheels. I would have tumbled down 12 hardwood stairs. At 7 months pregnant, that fall would have been fatal for the baby, and possibly for me. My hands shook so hard I had to set the basket down. This was malicious. This was attempted murder disguised as adolescent clutter. I marched to Leo's room. He was playing video games, wearing headphones, completely immersed in a violent digital world. I pulled the headphones off his head. "Hey," he yelled, spinning around. "What is your problem?" "Your skateboard." I hissed. It was at the top of the basement stairs. "So? I forgot it." "Chill out. You did not forget it. Leo, you placed it there." He laughed, a sound that was too old for his 15-year-old face. "You are paranoid. You know that?" Mom said the hormones make you crazy. You are imagining things. I stood there, looking at this boy I had tried to bond with for 3 years. I had bought him the latest consoles, tutored him in history, covered for him when he broke a window, and he looked at me now with pure contempt. "Give me your phone," I said, "and the controller. You are grounded. You cannot do that." He sneered. "You are not my mother." I am the adult in this house, and you just endangered my life. Hand them over." He threw the controller at the wall, cracking the plastic casing, but he handed over the phone. As I walked out with his electronics, I felt a hollow victory. I had taken his toys, but he had taken my sense of safety. When Mark came home that evening, the atmosphere was poisonous. I was waiting for him in the living room, ready to present my case. I had photos of the oil spill. I had the skateboard. I was ready to show him that his children were not just acting out. They were dangerous. But Mark walked in with a face like thunder. He did not kiss me hello. He tossed his briefcase onto the sofa and looked at me with disappointment radiating from his pores. "Vanessa called me," he said. Of course she did. I remained seated, my hand resting on my belly. "And what did Vanessa have to say?" I asked. "She says you cut off Mia's allowance and took Leo's phone because they left a mess in the kitchen. They did not just leave a mess." "Mark," I said, standing up. I winced as my bruised hip protested. Mia spilled oil right in the entryway and watched me fall. Leo left a skateboard at the top of the stairs. "They are trying to hurt me." Mark Sihil, rubbing his temples. He looked exhausted. A man caught between two fires and choosing to get burned by the one that heated his home less. "Rachel, honey, listen to yourself. They are kids. Kids are messy. They leave things around. To say they are trying to hurt you, that is, Saoyudzing Haoling. 2 hashes greater than that is a leap. Vanessa thinks you are projecting your stress onto them. She is worried you are becoming unstable. Unstable. The word hung in the air like a foul odor. "So you believe her?" I asked quietly. "You believe the woman who threatened me at our party over your wife?" "I am not taking sides," Mark said, deploying his favorite neutral phrase. "But you have to admit, you have been on edge. Maybe you are being a little hard on them. They are adjusting too. This new baby, Saoyudzing Haoling, 2 hashes greater than it scares them. They feel replaced." He walked over to the liquor cabinet and poured himself a scotch. I watched him, realizing that Vanessa had already won this round. She had framed my survival instinct as hysteria. Later that night, I went downstairs to get a glass of water. I heard whispering in the mudroom. I paused in the hallway, pressing myself against the wall. It was Mark and Leo. "I know she is being difficult, buddy," Mark was saying, his voice hushed. "Just try to stay out of her way until the baby comes. She is going through a lot of changes." "I know, Dad, but I need money for the field trip lunch tomorrow." She cut me off. I heard the distinct rustle of cash. "Here is 100. Mark whispered. "Do not tell Rachel. Just Saoyudzing Haoling. 2 hashes greater than go easy on her." "Okay, thanks. Dad, you are the best." I stood in the dark, my hand over my mouth. It was not the money. Mark made plenty of money. It was the secrecy. It was the undermining. In that moment, Mark had formed a coalition with them. He had paid them off to tolerate me. He had validated their narrative that I was the unreasonable tyrant and they were the victims of my hormonal tyranny. I went back upstairs without the water. I lay in bed, listening to Mark come up the stairs, brush his teeth, and slide into bed beside me. He draped his arm over my waist, a gesture of habit rather than affection. I did not move. I stared at the ceiling, where the shadows danced in the moonlight. I realized then that I was entirely alone in this house. The enemy was not just at the gate. The enemy was sleeping in the room down the hall, and the person who was supposed to guard the castle was slipping them keys under the table. My hip throbbed in time with my heart. I closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. I began to plan. If Mark was going to treat me like I was crazy, I would have to be smarter than sane. I would have to stop expecting him to save me. I rolled over, turning my back to my husband. The first crack in the foundation had appeared, and I knew, with terrifying certainty, that the whole house was going to come down. The Connecticut afternoon was gray and weeping rain against the windshield of my Audi as I drove home from the city. It was barely 2 in the afternoon. I never left work this early. I was the woman who prided herself on being the first one in the office and the last one to leave. The woman who answered emails at 3 in the morning. But today, the exhaustion was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest like a wet wool blanket. My ankles were swollen to the size of grapefruits, and a persistent, throbbing headache had taken up residence behind my left eye. I had told my assistant I had a doctor's appointment, but the truth was, I just needed to lie down. I needed to be in my sanctuary, away from the demands of clients who thought a logo redesign was a matter of life and death. I pulled into the driveway. The house loomed large and imposing in the drizzle, its white facade looking less like a home and more like a fortress. I noted that the garage door was closed. Mark was at work. Leo was at soccer practice. Mia, I assumed, it was at her piano lesson. The house should have been empty. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the foyer. The silence that usually greeted me was absent. Instead, a low hum of voices drifted down from the second floor. I froze, my hand still gripping the cold brass handle of the door. My first instinct was fear, an intruder. But then I recognized the cadence. It was not a stranger. It was the distinct, nasal quality of a voice I had come to loathe. Saluting Ho Ling. Dois Cardinal é maior que Vanessa. But Vanessa was not here. She was banned from the property. I slipped off my heels, leaving them on the rug to avoid the click-clack sound on the hardwood floors. I moved toward the stairs, my stockinged feet making no sound. The pain in my back was forgotten, replaced by a surge of adrenaline that sharpened my senses. As I ascended the stairs, the voice became clearer. It was coming from Mia's bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. It is simple math. Mia, you are smart. You are in honors math. Do the calculation. It was Vanessa. She was on speakerphone. I stopped just outside the door, pressing myself against the floral wallpaper of the hallway. My heart was hammering so hard I feared they might hear it through the wood. I know, Mom, Mia's voice replied. She sounded petulant, but also engaged, like a student eager to please a teacher. But Dad said the trust is locked. He said Grandpa set it up so we are all taken care of. Vanessa let out a sharp, derisive laugh. That sound chilled me more than the damp air outside. Your father is a naive fool. Honey, he thinks love pays the bills. Listen to me. Grandpa's trust is a fixed asset. It is a pie. Right now, that pie is cut into 2 slices. One for you, one for Leo. That is enough for Yale. For a down payment on a house in Westport. For a life where you never have to worry. I held my breath. I knew about the trust. Of course, Mark's father came from old steel money. He had set up a generation-skipping trust to avoid estate taxes. It was substantial, somewhere in the range of $4 million, to be distributed when the grandchildren turned 25. But then Vanessa continued, her voice dropping lower, becoming conspiratorial. When that thing is born, the pie gets cut into 3. Do you understand what that means? You lose 33% of your future. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. Mia, That money goes from your pocket straight into the pocket of Rachel's little brat. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had thought the hostility was about attention. I had thought it was about the fear of being replaced in their father's heart. I had been so stupid. I had been looking at this through the lens of a family drama, while Vanessa was playing a game of corporate liquidation. But it is not fair, Mia whined. It is not even a real person yet. Exactly, Vanessa said, seizing on the sentiment. It is an intruder. It is stealing from you before it even takes a breath. Rachel knows this. Why do you think she rushed to get pregnant? She is securing the bag. Mia, she is cash-strapping herself to the Sterling legacy. She does not care about you. She is stealing your inheritance to fund her retirement. The room spun. I had to grip the doorframe to steady myself. The accusation was so vile, so completely inverted from the truth, that it made me nauseous. I was the one who paid for the vacations. I was the one who put $50,000 of my own bonuses into their savings accounts last Christmas. So what do we do? Mia asked. Her voice was small, fearful. You do what you have to do to protect what is yours, Vanessa said smoothly. Stress is very bad for pregnancies, specifically geriatric ones like hers. High blood pressure, 少予警号令. Dose, accidents, 少予警号令. 2# is greater than things happen. If nature takes its course, the pie stays in 2 pieces. I clapped a hand over my mouth to stifle a gasp. This was not just greed. This was solicitation. She was encouraging her 13-year-old daughter to induce a miscarriage. Just then, I heard the sound of movement inside the room. Hold on. Mom, I have to pee. Do not hang up. Footsteps approached the door. I panicked. There was nowhere to hide. I quickly backed into the guest room across the hall, leaving the door cracked just a sliver. Mia walked out of her room, phone still on her bed, and headed toward the bathroom at the end of the hall. The moment the bathroom door clicked shut, I moved. It was reckless. It was insane. But I needed to know. I needed to see the face of the enemy. I slipped into Mia's room. It was a typical teenage girl's room. Posters of bands, a pile of clothes on the chair, the smell of body mist. Lying on the duvet was Mia's iPad, not her phone. The phone call had ended or was on hold, but the iPad was glowing. I walked over to it. It was unlocked. Mia, in her arrogance, had not bothered with the passcode inside her own house. It was open to a group chat app. The name of the group was the Sterling Squad. I scanned the members. Mark, Vanessa, Leo, Mia. I was not in it. My husband was in a group chat with his ex-wife and children. A digital living room where I was not welcome. I scrolled up. My fingers were trembling so violently I nearly dropped the device. The messages were a horror show. Vanessa, did you see the dress she wore to the party? Looked like a sausage casing. Put that on the list. Leo, she tried to talk to me about Minecraft today. Cringe. Mark, guys, be nice. She is trying. Vanessa, she is trying to replace me. Mark, and you are letting her. Mia, she made organic kale chips. I threw them in the trash. But then, I found the conversation from yesterday. The one that made my blood run cold. Vanessa, how is the parasite doing today? Any kicks? Mia, she says it is kicking. It is gross. I can see her stomach moving. Vanessa, just remember, every kick is a $sign leaving your bank account. The parasite is eating your future. And I put the skateboard where you said. She did not fall though. She saw it. Vanessa, subtlety. Leo, we need subtlety. Gaslight. Do not arson. Make her think she is losing her mind. I stared at the screen. The parasite. That was what they called my son. My unborn child was not a brother, not a baby. He was a parasite. And Mark. Saoyutsing Haling. 2# is greater than Mark was in this chat. I scrolled up, desperately, looking for his defense, looking for him to tell them to stop. I found nothing. He had not responded to the parasite comments. His silence was a co-signature. He was allowing them to dehumanize his unborn child to keep the peace with his ex-wife. I heard the toilet flush down the hall. Panic surged through me. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hands were shaking so bad the camera refused to focus at first. I took a deep breath, steadying my hands against my chest, and snapped 3 pictures of the screen. The conversation about the trust, the name parasite, the instruction about the skateboard. I heard the bathroom door open. I dropped the iPad back onto the duvet, exactly where it had been. I turned and sprinted, or waddled as fast as I could, out of the room. I made it into the guest room just as Mia walked back into the hallway. I pressed myself against the wall, eyes closed, listening. "Mom, you there?" Mia's voice drifted from her room. "I am here, baby." I waited until I heard the murmur of their conversation resume. Then I crept out of the guest room and went downstairs. I did not stop until I was in the kitchen. I leaned against the marble island, the same one where I had slipped on the oil, and gasped for air. My world had tilted on its axis. 10 minutes ago, I was a tired pregnant woman dealing with stepchild resentment. Now, I was a target in a financial assassination plot. I looked down at my phone. The photos were there, clear, damning. My thumb hovered over Mark's contact. I could send them right now. I could blow this house apart. I could show him that his innocent kids and his struggling ex were conspiring to harm us. But then I stopped. I remembered Mark's face when he handed Leo the $100 bill. I am not taking sides. If I showed him this now, he would confront them. Vanessa would spin it. She would say it was a joke, dark humor to help the kids cope. She would say I was invading Mia's privacy by snooping on her iPad. She would turn the victimhood back on herself. And Mark, weak, conflict-averse Mark, might believe her, or worse, he might ask me to forgive them. No, this was not enough. I needed more. I needed to let them think they were winning. I needed them to get sloppy. I put the phone back in my pocket. I went to the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of sparkling water. My hands were steady now. The fear had evaporated, burned away by the heat of a cold, hard realization. I was not just fighting for my marriage anymore. I was fighting for my son's life. The front door opened. "Rachel, I saw your car. You are home early?" It was Mark. He walked into the kitchen, smiling, oblivious. He looked at me. I looked at the water in my hand. "Are you okay? You look pale." I looked at my husband, the man who was in a group chat where his son was called a parasite, the man who let his ex-wife poison his children against me because it was easier than standing up to her. I smiled. It was a mask, perfectly constructed, crafted from years of boardroom negotiations. "I am fine, darling," I lead, my voice smooth as silk, just a little headache. "I am going to go rest." I walked past him, brushing his arm with my hand. I felt nothing. The love I had held for him an hour ago had curdled into something sour and unrecognizable. As I climbed the stairs, passing Mia's closed door, I made a silent vow to the baby kicking inside me. They want a war? I thought. Fine, I will show them what happens when you try to steal from a mother. I went into our bedroom and locked the door. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the photos again. Gaslight. Do not arson. Vanessa thought she was the screenwriter of this drama. She thought she was directing the scene. She had no idea that I had just stolen the script. I became a ghost in my own home, haunting the hallways with a suspicion that bordered on obsession. The days following my discovery of the iPad messages were not filled with screaming matches or accusations. Instead, they were filled with the quiet, methodical installation of surveillance. If Vanessa wanted to play a spy game, I would upgrade the technology. I waited until Wednesday, when Mark was at the office and the children were at school, to install the cameras. I hid a tiny lens inside the carbon monoxide detector in the hallway. I placed a teddy bear with a camera in its glass eye on the bookshelf in the nursery. I tucked a motion sensor device behind the decorative vase on the kitchen island. By noon, I had transformed the Sterling residence into a panopticon. I could see everything from an app on my phone. I told myself this was for protection. I told myself I needed evidence for the police or a divorce lawyer. But deep down, there was a darker gratification. I was watching the rats in the maze. The house felt brittle, like dried leaves ready to crumble at the slightest touch. Mark, in his desperate attempt to glue the family fragments back together, insisted on a mandatory family dinner on Friday night. We are going to sit down, eat a meal, and act like civilized people, he declared, adjusting his tie in the mirror. No phones, no arguments, just family. I looked at him, buttoning my blouse over my swollen stomach. You have no idea. Mark, I thought, you are organizing a tea party in a minefield. I will make a roast, I said aloud. The dinner began with a silence so thick it felt suffocating. The only sounds were the scraping of silverware against china and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the foyer. Leo ate with his head down, shoveling potatoes into his mouth as if speed would hasten his escape. Mia picked at her green beans, her eyes darting between Mark and me with a predatory gleam. So, Mark said, his voice too loud, too cheerful. I was thinking we could all go to the lake house next month. Maybe take the boat out before it gets too cold. I hate the lake, Mia said instantly. There are too many mosquitoes. It would be nice to get some fresh air. Mark persisted. Rachel needs the relaxation. Mia dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the plate. Why does everything have to be about what Rachel needs? She asked. Her voice was not whining. It was sharp, probing. Mia, Mark warned. No, seriously. Dad, we have to change our schedule because Rachel is tired. We cannot make noise because Rachel has a headache. We are spending $5,000 on a crib for a baby that cannot even see color yet. But you would not let me get the new iPhone. It is not $5,000. Mia, I said, keeping my voice level. And it is for safety. Safety, she scoffed. You act like this baby is the Messiah. It is just a baby. Mom says you are spending Dad's money on the nursery just to lower the liquidity of the estate. The table went deadly silent. Mark dropped his napkin. That is enough. Mia, your mother should not be discussing finances with you. Why? Because it is true? Mia challenged, looking directly at me. You are just trying to secure the bag. Right, Rachel? You want to make sure there is nothing left for us. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks. The phrase secure the bag was verbatim from the text messages. She was reciting lines from a script Vanessa had written. I am trying to build a family. Mia, I said, my voice trembling slightly. Something you seem intent on destroying. Mia let out a cruel, short laugh. You are the one who destroyed our family. We were fine before you came along with your fake smile and your Botox. Mia, leave the table, Mark shouted. He slammed his hand down, rattling the wine glasses. Go to your room. Fine. Mia spat. She stood up so abruptly her chair screeched against the hardwood floor. I am glad to go. Looking at her makes me sick, anyway. She turned and stomped toward the kitchen doorway. Passing behind my chair, I stood up as well, instinctively wanting to clear the plates, to do something with my shaking hands. As I rose, turning slightly to stack Mark's plate on mine, Mia was right behind me. It happened in a blur, but my mind replayed it in ultra-high definition later. Mia did not just walk past. She lunged. She threw her weight to the left, dropping her shoulder. Her elbow, bony and sharp, drove hard into the side of my protruding stomach. It was not a brush. It was a blow. The pain was immediate and blinding. A white-hot spike that shot through my uterus and seized my breath. It felt like being punched in the gut, but 1,000 times worse, because the target was so vulnerable. I gasped, dropping the plates. The china shattered on the floor with a crash that sounded like a gunshot. My reaction was primal. It bypassed my brain entirely. It was the reaction of a wounded animal protecting its young. My right hand whipped out. The slap connected with Mia's cheek with a sickening, fleshy crack. Mia screamed. It was a high, piercing shriek that sounded more theatrical than pained. But the red mark blooming on her pale skin was real. She stumbled back, clutching her face, her eyes wide with shock and triumph. You hit me, she screamed. Daddy? She hit me. I stood frozen, my hand still stinging, clutching my stomach with the other arm. The pain in my belly was throbbing. A dull, terrifying ache. Rachel, Mark roared. He was out of his chair in a second, rushing not to me, but to Mia. He gathered his daughter into his arms. She buried her face in his chest, sobbing hysterically. She hit me. Dad, she slapped me. I just tripped. I tripped and she hit me. I looked at Mark. I expected him to ask if the baby was okay. I expected him to ask why Mia had elbowed me. Instead, he looked at me with eyes I had never seen before. They were cold. They were stranger's eyes. What is wrong with you? He shouted, his voice cracking with disbelief. You just struck a 13-year-old girl? She elbowed me in the stomach. Mark, I gasped, leaning against the table for support. She hit the baby. I did not. Mia wailed into his shirt. I slipped on the rug. It was an accident. She is lying. She hates me. The front door burst open. It was not locked. We never locked it until bedtime. Get away from my daughter. Vanessa flew into the dining room like a harpy descending from the clouds. She must have been waiting in the driveway for pickup, listening. Or maybe Mia had texted her the moment the argument started. She tore Mia from Mark's arms and shoved him aside. She grabbed Mia's face, inspecting the red mark with the intensity of a forensic pathologist. Oh my God, Vanessa breathed. Turning to face us, she pulled out her phone instantly. Look at this. She assaulted a minor. Vanessa. Wait, Mark stammered, holding up his hands. Let us calm down. Calm down? Vanessa shrieked, her eyes locked onto mine, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of pure, unadulterated joy. She hit my child. Mark, you saw it. I hit her because she attacked my unborn child, I yelled. the tears finally spilling over. I was shaking violently. My stomach hurt. God, my stomach hurt. You are a monster. Vanessa spat at me. She turned the phone toward me, hitting record. Say it for the camera. Rachel, tell everyone how you discipline your stepchildren. Get that out of my face, I warned. Stepping back, Mark stepped between us, but he was facing me. He was blocking me. Not her. Rachel, go upstairs, Mark said. His voice was low, trembling with repressed anger. What? I whispered. Go upstairs. Now, before this gets worse. But Mark, 小玉静好令. 2 hash is greater than she hurt me. 小玉静好令. R. 静好大you. Look at her face. Rachel, Mark yelled, pointing at Mia, who was sobbing dramatically into Vanessa's shoulder. You lost control. Go upstairs. I stared at him, the man I loved, the man I had married. He was standing with his ex-wife and his daughter, forming a wall against me. I was the aggressor. I was the unstable, hormonal, wicked stepmother who battered children. I looked at Mia, through her tears, past her mother's shoulder. She caught my eye. She stopped crying for just a fraction of a second. She did not smile this time. She just stared, cold and victorious. She had taken the slap. She had traded a stinging cheek for my destruction. It was a calculated sacrifice. I turned and walked out of the dining room. I climbed the stairs, my hand clutching my belly, praying that the cramping I felt was just stress and not the beginning of the end. I went into the bedroom and locked the door. I collapsed onto the bed, curling into a fetal position around my stomach. Downstairs, I could hear Vanessa's voice, shrill and demanding. I heard Mark apologizing. I heard the word police. I reached for my phone to check the camera feed. I wanted to see the truth. I opened the app. The screen was black. I refreshed it, still black. Then I remembered. The Wi-Fi. Mark had rebooted the router downstairs right before dinner because the TV was lagging. The cameras needed 10 minutes to reconnect. The system had been offline. There was no recording. There was no proof of the elbow. There was only the red mark on Mia's face and 3 witnesses who would swear I was the villain. I lay in the dark, listening to the murmurs of my husband comforting his ex-wife. And I realized with terrifying clarity that I had just walked off a cliff. The fallout was nuclear. By 10 o'clock the next morning, the video was everywhere. It was a 20-second clip, expertly edited. It started with the sound of the slap, a sharp, violent crack that echoed sickeningly, and then cut to Mia sobbing, her cheek blazing red, while I stood over her, looking disheveled and enraged. Vanessa had captioned it simply, "This is what happens when you trust a stepmother with your babies. My heart is broken." It had been shared 400 times on the local community page alone. The comments were a cesspool of vitriol. Monster. Abuser. Call Child Protective Services immediately. She should be in jail. I sat in the nursery, the only room in the house that felt somewhat safe, staring at my phone until the screen blurred. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the device. Mark had slept in the guest room. He had left for work before I woke up, leaving a note on the kitchen counter that read, "We need to talk. Do not contact the kids." My phone rang. It was Mark's mother, Eleanor. I hesitated. Eleanor was a woman who wielded guilt like a scalpel. But if I did not answer, she would call Mark. And Mark was already drowning. "Hello, Eleanor," I said, my voice raspy. "How could you?" she began, skipping the pleasantries. Her voice was icy. trembling with indignation. The Sterlings have lived in this county for 50 years. We have built a reputation of dignity, and in one night, you have turned us into tabloid fodder. Eleanor, you do not understand. I tried to interject. Mia hit me in the stomach. She hurt the baby. Oh, stop it. Eleanor snapped. Stop blaming a child for your lack of control. Vanessa called me. She told me everything. You have been hostile to those children since the day you got pregnant. You are jealous. Rachel, it is pathetic. Jealous? I almost laughed. Of what? Of a teenager who hates me. You have embarrassed my son. You have embarrassed this family. If you want to remain a part of this household, you will fix this. You will apologize to Vanessa. Publicly, you will apologize to Mia. And you will start seeing a therapist for your anger issues. If you do not, Xiao Jinghao Ling, 2# is greater than well. Let us just say the trust fund has a morality clause for a reason. She hung up before I could respond. I dropped the phone onto the plush rug. My head was pounding. A sharp, rhythmic throb at the base of my skull. My vision swam with black spots. I stood up to get water, but the room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the crib to steady myself. My heart was racing, fluttering in my chest like a trapped bird. I sat back down, breathing heavily. Preeclampsia. The doctor had warned me about stress. Watch your blood pressure. Rachel, I needed to calm down. I needed to breathe. But how could I breathe when the air was being sucked out of the room by the vacuum of their hatred? Mark came home early that afternoon. He walked into the nursery and found me sitting in the rocking chair, staring at the wall. He looked haggard. His tie was loosened. His eyes red-rimmed. Vanessa is pressing charges, he said quietly. I looked at him. Assault? She is willing to drop them, he said, rubbing his face. But she has conditions. Conditions? She wants you to issue a public apology on social media. She wants you to admit you were wrong and that it was a hormonal outburst. And she wants supervised visitation only for you with the kids until the baby is born. I stared at him. You want me to admit to something I did not do? She elbowed me. Mark, look. I pulled up my shirt. A large, ugly bruise was blooming on the side of my stomach, purple and yellow against my pale skin. Mark looked at it. He flinched. For a moment, I saw the conflict in his eyes. He reached out, his fingers hovering over the bruise. That looks painful, he whispered. It is proof. Mark, I cried. She hit me, or you ran into the table, he said softly, pulling his hand back. That is what Mia said. She said you lunged at her and hit your hip on the table. I stared at him, my mouth agape. They had an answer for everything. They had rewritten reality. And my husband, the lawyer, the man trained to look for evidence, was buying their version because it was less painful than admitting his daughter was a sociopath. I cannot apologize. Mark, it is a lie. Rachel, please. Mark begged, his voice cracking. My parents are threatening to cut us off. The partners at the firm are asking questions. If this goes to court, it will be a circus. Just Xiao Jinghao Ling. 2# is greater than just swallow your pride. For the baby. Oh, for us. Xiao Jinghao Ling. 2. For us. I looked at this man, kneeling before me, begging me to sacrifice my dignity to save his comfort. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. It was a quiet snap, like a dry twig breaking in a winter forest. The Rachel who wanted to be the perfect wife died in that rocking chair. The Rachel who wanted to please the in-laws, who wanted to be the cool stepmom, who wanted to keep the peace. 邵玉静号令, 2 hashes greater than she was gone. In her place, something cold and hard began to form. A diamond forged under extreme pressure. Okay, I said. My voice was eerily calm. Okay? Mark looked up. Hopeful. I will apologize. I will do whatever Vanessa wants. Mark exhaled a long, shuddering breath of relief. Thank you. Oh God. Thank you. Rachel, you are doing the right thing. He hugged me. I let him. I felt like I was hugging a stranger. Later that evening, I sat at my laptop. Mark watched over my shoulder as I typed the post. I want to publicly apologize to my stepdaughter, Mia, and her mother, Vanessa. My behavior yesterday was unacceptable. The stress of my pregnancy caused a lapse in judgment, and I reacted poorly to an accident. I love my family, and I am committed to earning back their trust. It was the perfect confession. It was humble. It was pathetic. 邵玉静号令. Dve. I hit post. Mark squeezed my shoulder. Good. That is good. Now we can move on. He went downstairs to call Vanessa and tell her the good news. I sat there, staring at the screen as the likes and comments started rolling in. So brave of you to admit it. Glad you are getting help. Poor Mia. I closed the laptop. I walked over to the window and looked out at the dark driveway. I touched the bruise on my stomach. Move on? I thought, no. Mark, we are not moving on. We are just getting started. I picked up my phone. I opened a secure browser, one that left no history. I typed in the name of a private investigator I had used once for a difficult copyright case at work. A man who found dirt that did not exist. Then I opened my banking app. I transferred $50,000 from our joint savings into a private account Mark did not know about. It was my money from my bonuses, but I had always kept it in the joint account as a sign of trust. Trust was dead. Cash was king. I walked into the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes dark with exhaustion, but there was a fire burning behind them now. A cold, blue flame. They wanted a villain? Fine, I would give them a villain, but I would not be the kind that screams and slaps. I would be the kind that smiles while she burns your house down. I went back into the bedroom. Mark was coming up the stairs, looking lighter, happier. She agreed to drop the charges. He said, beaming, she is even coming over tomorrow to bring some of her homemade lasagna, a peace offering. I smiled at him. It was a dazzling smile. That sounds lovely. Mark, I cannot wait to see her. I lay down in bed, listening to the wind howl outside. Tomorrow, Vanessa would come into my house. She would bring her poison, disguised as pasta. She would think she had won. She would think I was broken, submissive, defeated. Let her think that, because while she was celebrating her victory, I would be sharpening my knife. The following evening, the atmosphere in the house was surreal. It felt less like a family dinner and more like a staged play where everyone had memorized their lines but hated the casting. Vanessa arrived at 6, sharp, carrying a large ceramic dish covered in foil. She wore a soft pastel cardigan and minimal makeup, presenting the image of the benevolent matriarch coming to aid the faltering stepmother. Mark greeted her at the door with a hug that lingered a second too long. Thank you for coming, Van. It means a lot. Anytime. Mark, we are family. After all, she cooed, her eyes scanning the hallway until they landed on me. I stood by the staircase, wearing a loose maternity blouse. My hands clasped in front of me. I forced the corners of my mouth up. "Hello, Vanessa. Thank you for the food." She walked over to me, and for a moment, I thought she might hug me. Instead, she patted my arm, a gesture so patronizing it made my skin crawl. "We just want you to be healthy, Rachel. For the baby, stress is a killer." We moved into the dining room. The lasagna smelled rich and garlicky, filling the space with a scent that should have been comforting, but instead turned my stomach. Leo and Mia were already seated. They did not look at me. They were scrolling on their phones, occasionally whispering to each other. Mark served the food. He was manic in his attempt to keep the conversation flowing, talking about the weather, the local football team, anything to avoid the elephant in the room. "This is delicious." "Fun," Mark said, taking a large bite, "just like you used to make." Vanessa smiled, preening, "Well, I know how much you miss home-cooked meals." Rachel is so busy with her career. I picked up my food, moving the layers of pasta around my plate. I was not hungry. My intuition was screaming at me, a high-pitched alarm in the back of my mind. After dinner, Vanessa insisted on cleaning up. "You rest, Rachel. You look peaked." I went into the living room and sat on the sofa. Mark followed Vanessa into the kitchen. I could hear them laughing. It was a sound from a past life, a life where they were happy and I did not exist. Leo walked past me, heading toward the kitchen. He paused at the doorway, looked back at me, and then slipped inside. I pulled out my phone. The cameras were back online. I had double-checked the Wi-Fi connection 3 times before they arrived. I opened the app and selected the kitchen feed. The view was grainy, but clear enough. Vanessa was at the sink. Mark was drying dishes. Leo was leaning against the counter, near the blender where I kept my nightly pregnancy smoothie ingredients. I watched as Vanessa dried her hands and turned to Leo. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan. My breath hitched. She pulled out a small, brown glass bottle. It looked like an essential oil vial or a medicine dropper. She slipped it into Leo's hand. Her lips moved. I zoomed in on the screen, trying to read them, just a little, to help her sleep. Mark was turned away, putting plates in the cupboard. He saw nothing. Leo looked at the bottle, then at the blender. He hesitated. I watched, frozen in horror, as Vanessa reached out and touched his cheek. She smiled, a soft, encouraging smile, the kind of smile a mother gives a son before a big game. Leo nodded. He uncapped the bottle and tipped it over the blender pitcher, which contained the almond milk and spinach I had prepped earlier. He gave it 3 hard shakes. Then he capped the bottle and shoved it into his jeans pocket. My heart stopped. Mark turned around. Leo grabbed an apple from the bowl and took a bite. Acting casual, I closed the app. My hands were ice cold. 5 minutes later, Mark came into the living room carrying a tall glass of green smoothie. "Here you go, honey," he said, placing it on the coaster. "Vanessa made it for you. She said you need the iron." I looked at the glass. The green liquid looked innocuous. It looked healthy. "Thank you," I said. My voice was steady, terrifyingly so. Vanessa walked in, wiping her hands on a towel. "Drink up, Rachel. It has a little magnesium in it too. Good for the cramps." I lifted the glass. I could smell the spinach, the banana, and underneath it, something faint, something chemical, like bitter almonds. I brought the glass to my lips. Everyone was watching. Mark, with his hopeful, oblivious smile. Vanessa, with her predatory gaze masked as concern. Leo, lurking in the hallway, peeking around the corner. If I did not drink it, they would know I knew. If I accused them now, without analysis, they would call me paranoid again. Vanessa would say it was just magnesium. Just like she said, they would gaslight me until I broke. I needed proof. Irrefutable. Biological proof. I took a sip. It tasted metallic. I forced myself to swallow. Then another sip. Good? Vanessa asked. It is. Saoyuting 2 hashes greater than different. I said. I drank half the glass. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. I was gambling with my life and the life of my son, but I knew that a half dose might make me sick. But a full accusation without proof would make me dead. Socially, legally, and maritally. 15 minutes later, the pain arrived. It did not start slowly. It hit like a sledgehammer, a cramping so violent it doubled me over on the sofa. I cried out, dropping the glass. It shattered on the floor, green sludge splattering the white rug. Rachel, Mark shouted. My stomach seized. It felt like a vice was crushing my uterus. Sweat popped out on my forehead instantly. Mark, it hurts. Something is wrong, I screamed. Vanessa stood up, looking alarmed. Oh my God, is it the baby? Call 911, Mark yelled, scrambling for his phone. I looked at Vanessa. She was acting panicked, but her eyes were alert. She was watching the show she had directed. The cramps intensified. I felt a wetness between my legs. Saoyuting 2 hashes greater than blood. No, 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 I sobbed. Not my baby. Please. God, not my baby. The world began to narrow. The pain was all-consuming. I could hear Mark shouting instructions to the operator. I could see Leo standing in the doorway, his face pale, looking terrified. Perhaps the reality of what he had done was finally hitting him. Vanessa moved closer to me. She knelt down, grabbing my hand. Breathe. Rachel, just breathe. It is going to be okay. I yanked my hand away. Do not touch me, I hissed. She leaned in close, pretending to wipe sweat from my brow. Maybe you just were not meant to be a mother, she whispered. Darkness began to creep into the edges of my vision. The room spun. The sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. As I was loaded onto the stretcher, clutching my stomach, I saw Mark weeping. I saw Vanessa hugging Leo and Mia. I closed my eyes. I let the darkness take me. But before I went under, I held on to one thought. One singular, burning ember of hate. You missed, because I could still feel the flutter, faint, terrified. But there, my son was fighting, and if he lived, I would burn their world to ash. The hospital lights were blinding, a harsh, fluorescent white that seared my retinas as I fluttered my eyes open. The air smelled of antiseptic and cold steel. I was alive. My hand flew instinctively to my stomach. It was still there. The mound was still firm. Miss Sterling? A doctor stood over me. He was young, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. My baby? I croaked. My throat felt like it had been scrubbed with sandpaper. He is stable, the doctor said, and the relief that washed over me was so profound I almost wept. We managed to stop the contractions. You are dilated 2 centimeters, but if you stay on bed rest, we can keep him in. He paused, looking down at his clipboard. His expression shifted from professional to grave. However, Rachel, Saoyuting Ling, 2 hashes greater than we need to talk about your blood work. I tried to sit up, wincing as the IV line tugged at my arm. What is it? We found high concentrations of castor oil and a synthetic compound often used in veterinary laxatives in your system. It is called misoprostol. It is sometimes used to induce labor, or Saoyuting 2-hash is greater than in higher doses. Abortion. The room went silent. The hum of the machines seemed to amplify. I looked at the doctor, castor oil, and misoprostol, the cocktail, the magnesium Vanessa had put in the smoothie. Did you take anything? The doctor asked gently. Any herbal supplements? Anything not prescribed? I shook my head slowly. No. Then, Rachel, Saoyuting 2-hash is greater than we have to consider how this got into your body. This was not accidental ingestion. This was a significant dose. I closed my eyes. The image of Leo shaking the bottle into the blender played in my mind. The image of Vanessa whispering to him, "Is my husband here?" I asked. "He is in the waiting room. He has been pacing for 3 hours. Should I call him in?" "No," I said. The word was sharp. The doctor looked surprised. "I need you to do something for me first," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I need you to document those findings. The toxicology report. I need it printed. And I need you to call the police." "The police?" I looked him dead in the eye. "I was poisoned, doctor, by my family." 20 minutes later, 2 officers stood by my bed. I gave my statement. I told them about the smoothie. I told them about the threats. I told them about the trust fund. They took notes, their faces impassive but serious. When they left, I finally allowed Mark to enter. He looked wrecked. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes swollen. He rushed to the bedside, reaching for my hand. "Oh, God. Rachel, they said you are okay. They said the baby is okay." I was so scared. I pulled my hand away. He froze. "Rachel, where are they?" I asked. Saoyuting 2-hash is greater than who? Vanessa, Leo, Mia, they are. Saoyuting 2-hash is greater than they are in the lobby. They wanted to make sure you were all right. Vanessa is really worried. Rachel, she has been crying. Crying because I am alive? I asked. Mark recoiled as if I had slapped him. What? What are you saying? This was a medical emergency. You had a reaction to something. I had a reaction to poison. Mark, I reached for the toxicology report lying on the bedside table and threw it at him. The papers fluttered onto his lap. Saoyuting 2-hash is greater than. Read it. He picked up the papers. His eyes scanned the medical jargon. He frowned. Castor oil? Misoprostol? I do not understand. Vanessa put it in the smoothie. Mark. She gave the bottle to Leo. Leo put it in the blender. I watched them do it. That is insane. Mark stood up, the papers crumpling in his fist. You are accusing my son of poisoning you? He is 15 years old. He is a pawn. Mark, and Vanessa is the queen. And you, Saoyuting 2-hash is greater than you are the board they are playing on. Stop it, Mark shouted. His face was red. Just stop it. You are traumatized. You are looking for someone to blame. Vanessa made that smoothie to help you. I looked at my husband. I looked at the man I had promised to love and cherish, and I realized that his denial was a fortress. No amount of truth would breach it, because to believe me meant accepting that his entire life was a lie. It meant accepting that his son was a criminal and his ex-wife was a monster. He was too weak to carry that weight. Get out, I said. Saoyuting 2 Raute ist größer als Rachel. Saoyuting Jinghao Dayu. Get out, I screamed. I do not want you here. I do not want any of you here. The door opened. A nurse peeked in, looking alarmed. Sir, you need to lower your voice or leave. I am leaving, Mark said. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and anger. I am going to take the kids home. When you are ready to stop this, Xiao Jing Hao Ling, 2# is greater than this madness. Call me. He walked out. I waited until the door clicked shut. Then I grabbed my phone. I dialed a number I had not called in years. Xiao Jing Hao Ling. Dois Cardinal. MIR Dad. Rachel? Is everything okay? It is 3 in the morning. I need you to come get me. Dad, bring Mom, and bring the car service. I am at Greenwich Hospital. What happened? I am leaving Mark. And I think Xiao Jing Hao Ling, 2# is greater than I think they tried to kill the baby. There was a silence on the other end. Then, a voice of steel, the voice of a man who had built a real estate empire from nothing. We are on our way. Do not say another word to anyone until we get there. Xiao Jing Hao Ling. 2. I hung up. I lay back against the pillows. I was alone in a sterile room, connected to machines, with a husband who thought I was crazy and a step-family that wanted me dead. But as I placed my hand on my stomach, feeling the rhythmic hiccup of my son, I felt a strange sense of peace. The victim was gone. The wife was gone. Now, there was only the mother, and God help anyone who stood in her way. My departure from Greenwich Hospital was not a quiet exit. It was an extraction. My father, a man who commanded rooms simply by walking into them, arrived with a private security detail. They flanked me as I was wheeled out to the black SUV, shielding me from any potential confrontation. Mark was nowhere to be seen. He had likely taken his brood home to comfort them, oblivious to the legal tsunami that was about to hit the Connecticut coastline. I spent the next 3 days at my parents' estate in the Hamptons. It was a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the ocean, a stark contrast to the colonial prison I had just escaped. I lay in a guest room that smelled of lavender and sea salt. My phone turned off, while my mother fed me bone broth and my father met with lawyers in the study. But silence is not stillness. While I rested, the world outside was erupting. Mark had returned to an empty house. He had found my closet half empty, my jewelry gone, and a note from my attorney stating that I had filed for legal separation and a restraining order against Vanessa, Leo, and Mia. That must have been the moment the cracks in his denial finally shattered. According to the police report I received later, Mark had sat alone in the kitchen for hours. Then, driven by a gnawing doubt he could no longer suppress, he had done the one thing I had prayed he would do. He logged into the cloud account for the home security system, the one I had supposedly fixed and given him the password to before I left. He watched the footage. He saw the kitchen scene. He saw Vanessa hand the bottle to Leo. He saw his 15-year-old son, the boy he had taught to ride a bike, shake poison into his stepmother's drink. He saw the cold calculation in their eyes. Then he listened to the audio from the living room, where Vanessa whispered to me as I writhed in pain, "Maybe you just were not meant to be a mother." Mark did not call me. He did not call his parents. He called the Greenwich Police Department. The arrest happened on a Tuesday morning. It was the kind of spectacle that wealthy neighborhoods pretend to abhor but secretly relish. Vanessa was at her rental home, likely celebrating her victory with a mimosa. The police arrived with a warrant for attempted assault, reckless endangerment, and conspiracy. They also had a warrant for Leo to be taken into juvenile custody. The video of Vanessa being let out in handcuffs looking disheveled and shrieking about her rights, was captured by a neighbor and uploaded to Twitter. It went viral within hours. Hashtag WickedExWife, hashtag poisoning plot, hashtag Greenwich scandal. The court of public opinion, which had condemned me as a child abuser just days ago, pivoted with dizzying speed. The narrative flipped. I was no longer the evil stepmother. I was the survivor of a gothic horror story. The comments section became a bloodbath for the Sterling family name. Oh my God, I saw the video of the son putting stuff in the blender. That kid is a psycho. The mom is the mastermind. Lock her up. I feel so bad for Rachel. We all judged her. Then came the fallout for the children. The private school Leo and Mia attended, an institution that prided itself on prestige and discretion, issued an immediate expulsion notice for Leo and a suspension for Mia pending investigation. The Parents Association, which Vanessa had once chaired, removed her name from the website faster than one could say scandal. But the real explosion happened when Vanessa, out on bail, decided to double down. Desperate, cornered, and stripped of her mask, she drove to my parents' house in the Hamptons. She did not know I was there. She thought I was hiding at a hotel. She came to scream at my parents, to demand they make me drop the charges. She rammed her SUV into the wrought iron gates of my father's estate. I watched from the balcony, wrapped in a cashmere blanket. Vanessa got out of the car, looking like a banshee. She was screaming incoherently, throwing rocks at the security camera. You stole my life. You stole my husband. You think you can take my children? I will kill you. It was a performance of pure, unadulterated madness, and it was all recorded. The police arrived within 10 minutes. This time, there was no bail. Violation of a restraining order, destruction of property, making terroristic threats. As they shoved her into the squad car, she looked up and saw me on the balcony. Our eyes locked. She did not look angry anymore. She looked terrified. She looked like a woman who realized she had played a game of chess against a grandmaster and had lost her queen, her knights, and her king. I did not smile. I did not wave. I simply turned around and walked back inside, closing the glass door behind me. The silence in the room was heavy, but it was clean. The air was scrubbed of lies. My father walked in, holding a tablet. Mark is on the phone. He said, he wants to talk to you. I looked at the tablet. Tell him to talk to my lawyer. I said, but Rachel, Sao Yiting howling. Tuhash is greater than he is sobbing. He says he is sorry. He says he had no idea. I know. Dad, that is the problem. A man who has no idea what is happening in his own home is not a husband. He is a liability. I touched my stomach. The baby kicked a strong, assertive thud against my ribs. I am not talking to him. Dad, not yet. Let him sit in the ruins of the house he let them build. My father nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. He hung up the phone. I walked to the window and looked out at the ocean. The waves were crashing against the rocks. Violent and beautiful, the world knew the truth now. The society papers were calling me a brave survivor. The trust fund managers were freezing assets. The Sterling name was mud. I had won the war, but looking at the wreckage, a husband broken, children criminalized, a woman incarcerated, I felt a strange hollowness. Victory tasted like ash, but ash was better than poison. The silence that follows a hurricane is often more unsettling than the storm itself. The winds die down, the rain stops, but you are left standing in a landscape that is irrevocably altered. Trees are uprooted, Landmarks are gone, and the ground beneath your feet feels unstable. 2 months had passed since the night of the poisoning. I was living in a guest cottage on my parents' estate, waiting for my son to arrive. The legal battles were raging in the background. A distant thunder of motions and depositions handled by expensive lawyers in glass offices. Mark tried to visit once. He drove 3 hours and stood at the security gate for 40 minutes, begging the guard to let him in. I watched him on the monitor. He looked like a ghost of the man I had married. He had lost weight. His clothes hung loosely on his frame, and his hair was unkempt. He held a bouquet of hydrangeas, my favorite, but they looked wilted, pathetic in his trembling hands. I did not let him in. I could not. If I saw him, if I smelled his cologne, if I let him look at my swollen belly with those sad, puppy dog eyes, I might falter, and I could not afford to falter. Not when I had a son to protect. The divorce papers were already filed. Irreconcilable differences. Cruel and inhumane treatment. Vanessa was awaiting trial. The district attorney was pushing for a stiff sentence. Attempted poisoning of a pregnant woman carries a weight that no amount of suburban privilege could lift. She had lost her rental home, her friends, and her standing. She was currently in a county jail, unable to make the revoked bail after the gate crashing incident. Leo was in a juvenile detention center, undergoing psychiatric evaluation. The report, which my lawyer had shared with me, was chilling. Lack of empathy, narcissistic tendencies, susceptible to manipulation. He was a product of his mother's molding, a weapon forged in the fire of her bitterness. Mia was with Mark's parents. Eleanor, the woman who had demanded I apologize, was now sending me weekly letters, handwritten notes on heavy cardstock, begging for forgiveness, asking for updates on the Sterling heir. She offered money. She offered the family vacation home. She offered anything to bridge the gap. I burned them all in the fireplace. But victory, as I was learning, was a lonely place. I spent my days walking on the beach, the cold Atlantic wind whipping my hair. I felt a profound sense of loss, not just for my marriage, but for the innocence I had lost. I had walked into that family thinking love was enough. I thought if I was kind, if I was generous, if I tried hard enough, they would accept me. I was wrong. Some people are black holes. They do not want your light. They want to consume it. One afternoon, I sat in the nursery I had set up in the cottage. It was smaller than the one in Greenwich, but it felt safer. There were no cameras here, no hidden agendas. I looked at the ultrasound photo on the dresser. My son, he was the only thing that mattered now. But a question gnawed at me. Was I any better than them? I had manipulated Mark. I had set traps. I had recorded them. I had used my father's money and connections to crush them. I had played their game, and I had won by being more ruthless. Was that strength? Or was that corruption? I remembered the look on Mia's face in the video. The moment after I slapped her. The triumph. She had wanted me to hit her. She had wanted me to become the villain. In a way, she had succeeded. I was not the sweet Rachel anymore. I was harder, colder. I looked at the world with suspicious eyes. When the housekeeper brought me tea, I checked the color. When a package arrived, I hesitated to open it. They had taken my peace. They had taken my trust in humanity. I lay down on the daybed, feeling the heavy, rhythmic movements of the baby. You are safe, I whispered to him. Mommy made sure the monsters are gone. But as the sun set, casting long shadows across the room, I wondered if the monsters were truly gone. or if I had just invited a different kind of monster into my soul. The monster of vengeance. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my lawyer. Vanessa is offering a plea deal. She will plead guilty to reckless endangerment if we drop the conspiracy charge against Leo. She wants to save the kid. I stared at the screen. Vanessa, the woman who called my son a parasite, was trying to fall on her sword for her son. Even monsters have maternal instincts. I thought about Leo, 15 years old, a boy who liked Minecraft and skateboarding before he was radicalized by his mother's greed. If he went down for conspiracy, his life was over. He would be a felon before he could vote. I held the power of his future in my hand. I could crush him. I could ensure he never recovered. Xiao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2, or Xiao Yu Jing Hao Ling, R, Jing Hao Da Yu. I typed a reply, no deal. We proceed to trial. I put the phone down. Mercy is for the innocent. Leo knew what was in that bottle. He knew what it would do. He made a choice. Now, he had to live with it. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in months, I slept without dreaming of green smoothies and shattered glass. The aftermath was a desolate landscape. Yes, but it was mine, and I would rebuild on it, brick by brick. A fortress that no one would ever breach again. My son was born on a Tuesday, during a snowstorm that blanketed New York in white silence. I named him Julian. He had my eyes, but he had Mark's chin. A cruel biological joke. A reminder that you can divorce a man, but you cannot edit his DNA out of your child. The birth was uncomplicated. A stark contrast to the pregnancy. When they placed him on my chest, warm and crying, I felt the final shackle break. I was no longer Rachel, the stepmother, or Rachel the victim, or Rachel the avenger. I was just Rachel, Julian's mother. 2 weeks later, the lawyers gathered in the conference room of my father's office for the final reading of the amended trust. Mark was there. He looked older, grayer. He sat at the far end of the mahogany table, flanked by his parents. Eleanor and Robert. Vanessa was not there. She was awaiting sentencing in a cell. Leo was in a juvenile facility. Mia was sitting next to Eleanor, looking small and terrified. She wore a modest dress, her hair pulled back, stripped of the arrogance that had defined her. The lawyer, a sharp man named Mr. Sterling, no relation, ironically, cleared his throat as per the instructions of Mr. Robert Sterling Sr., and in light of recent criminal proceedings, the terms of the Sterling Family Trust have been activated under the Morality and Conduct Clause. Eleanor gripped her husband's hand. Mia looked down at her lap. The clause states, the lawyer read, his voice devoid of emotion, that any beneficiary who is convicted of a felony or who engages in conduct that brings public disgrace or physical harm to another family member shall be immediately disqualified from the trust. A silence fell over the room, heavy, final. Therefore, the lawyer continued, the shares previously allocated to Leo Sterling and Mia Sterling are hereby revoked. The entirety of the trust, valued at $4.2 million, shall be held for the sole benefit of the remaining eligible grandchild, Julian Sterling. Mia let out a small sob. Eleanor closed her eyes, a tear leaking out. It was done. The very thing Vanessa had feared. The dilution of the inheritance had not happened. Instead, she had caused the total erasure of her children's legacy. By trying to save half the pie, she had lost the bakery. Mark looked at me across the table. His eyes were pleading. Rachel, he whispered, please, they are just kids. They have nothing. Vanessa spent all the alimony. They will not have money for college. So it's Holing. 2 is greater than they are Julian's siblings. I looked at Mark. I looked at Mia. I remembered the bruise on my stomach. I remembered the taste of bitter almonds. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I picked up my bag. They have their father. Mark, I said softly, you are a lawyer. You make good money. You can pay for their college. You can support them. You just have to work a little harder now. But the trust. Sayutjingho Ling. Too. Mark stammered. It was their future. No, Mark, I said, walking to the door. It was their motive. And now it is gone. I walked out of the conference room. I did not look back. Outside, the air was crisp and cold. My driver held the door open for me. I slid into the back seat where Julian was sleeping in his car seat. I looked at my son. He was the heir to an empire now. He would grow up with everything. Private schools, horses, travel, security. But as the car pulled away, merging into the traffic of the city, a thought lingered in my mind. I had destroyed them. I had taken everything. I had ensured that Vanessa would rot in jail and her children would struggle. It was justice, legally speaking, but was it right? I looked at my reflection in the window. The woman staring back was beautiful, wealthy, and powerful, but there was something in her eyes, a hardness that had not been there a year ago. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a check I had written earlier that morning. It was for $50,000, made out to a college fund for Mia Sterling. I held it in my hand. It was a drop in the bucket compared to what she had lost, but it was something, a crumb of mercy. I looked at the check, then I looked at the passing city. I tore the check in half, then I tore it again, and again, until it was just confetti in my hand. No, I thought, mercy is for those who ask for forgiveness. Mia never apologized. She only cried because she got caught. I rolled down the window and let the pieces of paper fly out into the wind. They swirled in the wake of the car, disappearing into the gray slush of the street. I rolled the window up. I turned to my son and smiled. We are going home. Julian, I whispered, just you and me. The car sped up, leaving the Sterlings, their broken trust, and their shattered lives in the rearview mirror. I did not check it. I only looked forward, because in the end, the only thing that matters is survival. And I had survived.